welcome back to the podcast. I'm hanging out with Will, head brewer at Ascent Brewing here in Calgary. How you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, yeah. You brought a selection of beers in, so
Yeah.
I've already chugged one.
Yeah, no, it's a good way to start.
Yeah. Well, Sandy, I was telling you, he was telling me I had to try the Hefeweizen, so
Right, yeah.
2 thumbs up.
Fantastic.
Is that the rating system?
Yeah.
Yeah?
It's that or nothing.
Yeah. Okay, so interesting fact about you. You went to Concordia University
Yeah.
you have a degree in economics, is that right?
Yes.
So is that common for brewers to go into economics and then become brewers after?
Probably not.
Yeah.
No. I kind of was homebrewing, and then I started university kind of thing, and I realized I was way more interested in brewing beer because I was doing it every weekend. But I also didn't want to get kicked out of my parents' house, so I decided to get an economics degree. So.
Well, to be fair, you could have been doing anything, and it would have been more exciting than getting an economics degree.
Probably. No.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't want to hear about all sorts of different graphs?
Hey, man, I have a business degree, and I had to take enough stats courses to...
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
I actually really enjoyed stats.
Yeah, well...
Yeah. And then I took a course called econometrics, which combines economic theory and statistics together to try and prove them.
Yeah. I get why you're a brewer. Yeah. Okay, so just a little bit of your background. You grew up in Montreal.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes.
Where have you brewed?
Okay, so I started out at a place called Brewtopia. So that's in downtown Montreal. They're just like a small little brew pub. So I got a job there as a busboy when I was 20. And then I kind of moved up to as like a bar back and a bartender. And then I would go during the week to meet and talk to the brewers so that they would know who I am and maybe offer me a job, like kind of.
So you were loitering.
Kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And then eventually they said, because they couldn't really give me a assistant brewing job because they weren't like big enough to have another employee, but they agreed to let me clean kegs and clean the brewery, which is kind of like, it was in the basement and it was basically just a long, narrow hallway that had fermenters in it. So you could barely move around. You had to always climb over stuff, and like there was just kegs everywhere. And then, I would just clean kegs every Sunday. But that kind of got me started to be able to say, like, in terms of a resume, being able to be like, oh, no, I have, assistant brewing experience, kind of thing. So then I realized that especially in Quebec and in Ontario, like, the kind of brewing scene was kind of exploding, and most breweries weren't in, like, the city. They were kind of, like, on the outskirts because they would need, like, a much larger building.
Right.
So I was sort of at this point where if I wanted to get a job somewhere I could easily move up, I would need to live either in rural Quebec or rural Ontario. And I was originally born in Ontario, so going back didn't seem that big of an issue. And my French is okay, but I don't know if living in a small town in Quebec where no one's ever heard anyone speak English before would go over that well. So,
and you can find pockets in Quebec.
Yeah, no, you
where
can't.
Where they're very intolerant if you don't speak a good version of French. Am I right?
I get told all the time. Like, I have a hard time saying that I can speak French because the second Quebecers hear my accent, they go, "Oh no, you can't speak French at all." So
yeah.
I'm kind of more of the opinion that I can't speak French at all, even though I can at least hold a conversation. Which should be worth something, right?
I would think so.
Yeah.
I think that's the definition of being able to speak a language, but what do I know?
No, there's a lot of passion and love in Quebec about language.
Yeah. Okay, so Brewtopia, where did you go after that?
I went to Northern Ontario, like you do, like any 23-year-old.
Of course, yeah.
So then I went to Stack Brewing in Sudbury. At the time, they were the only brewery in Sudbury. And they were just underway of like a massive expansion. So they wanted someone to start out as like an assistant brewer, cleaning kegs, cleaning fermenters and stuff. And they wanted someone who could quickly transition into brewing to help out the brewer because it was just him. He was like the head brewer and did all the brewing kind of thing. So it was becoming overwhelming. So because I at least had some experience, they
Because
were
you
like,
had cleaned kegs before, so I mean,
yeah, what's the difference between that and brewing, right?
Yeah.
But obviously I had home brewing experience, which meant something to them. So they hired me, and basically we did like basically a Zoom call, but I think it was a Skype call back then. And then I didn't hear anything for 2 weeks. So my sister was living in Toronto at the time. So I emailed them and said, hey, I'm going to be in Toronto. I could drive up because it's like 4 hours, and then we could do like an in-person interview, because that's kind of like the next step that normally happens. And then they emailed me back like, yeah, sure. But like, what are you coming, kind of thing. So I sort of forced my way into getting a second interview, and then they hired me after meeting me.
Nice.
So then I had to figure out, how do you move, across the country and stuff. So U-Haul one way is very useful for that.
Yeah.
And
they figured it out.
yeah. And then, I got a small apartment and stuff in Sudbury and lived there for probably 3 years.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
And then from there,
I kind of was like, I kind of want to move back kind of like to a city and stuff like that. No one really wants to spend the rest of their life in Northern Ontario. So
no offense to Northern Ontario.
I did really like Sudbury.
Yeah.
It is a nice place. It's full of very nice people, but it wasn't really
for a
sort of
young guy.
Yeah.
you want the city.
Yeah, exactly. So I started looking back at like kind of Montreal and if there was places, and McCausland was looking for a brewer and like an experienced brewer instead of just a brewer. So I talked to David Brophy, and we talked for like 15 minutes, and it might have been 20, but he immediately offered me a job.
We'll do some fact checking after
yeah,
this.
Exactly. Yeah. You could check with David.
Yeah.
But he basically, the second we hung up, he sent me an email saying like, if you're serious about coming back to Montreal, he's like, there's a job here for you.
Oh wow, good for you.
So yeah, and he said, if things go really well, like you can like move up and have like more responsibilities and things like that.
Nice. And
So,
did things end up going well?
Yeah, like on terms of my end, like I did everything that I needed to, kind of thing. But what ended up happening was like obviously like COVID started and things like that. So by the time I was supposed to kind of transition and have kind of more stuff to do, we kind of stripped down to like minimum staff.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it's hard to kind of be like, well, I was sort of promised to do a little more, have a little more like say, and maybe even run like the pilot system we have, when they're cutting like 50% of the staff.
Yeah.
So as then COVID kind of died out, I sat down with David and basically said, look, I'm going to start looking for head brewing jobs because I think I'm ready. I think I have enough experience to do it, and it's like I'm either doing it here or like I'm going to it somewhere else.
Right.
So on one hand, I was trying to force McCausland's hand to kind of like give me kind of what I wanted, but at the same time, I figured worst case scenario, like I'll get to be a head brewer anyways. So
Totally.
yeah, and David was really supportive, and he was actually happy that I like talked to him first and stuff. So he really respected that side of it too.
Yeah. So you mentioned him as a mentor of yours. So what about him sort of left that impression with you?
Yeah, the big thing is when I first started there, he was very encouraging of sort of, he wanted to hear kind of like my opinion, and sort of like, he wanted to learn more about different styles and like the newer styles that were coming out. So things like hazy IPAs and New England. So it sounds a little arrogant to be like his best quality was he wanted to listen to me.
Yeah.
But I really respected that, even though he had like 33 years of like professional brewing experience, what he cared more about was making like the best beer possible more than what he thinks is the best beer possible. So I'm kind of hoping that like now I've been in this industry for I guess almost 9 years, that like I'm hoping one day like I'll have like a similar experience kind of thing.
Yeah, you get to kind of, and I think that's, people always say like you got to be a lifelong learner, and I think him understanding that, right, knowing that you have a different perspective that is going to be valuable to him. And in terms of getting buy-in from a team, I mean, there's nothing that kills a spirit faster than not having any input. You know what I mean? So
no, exactly. And yeah, he like there was people that like he would always like listen to, who he would like respect and things like that. And obviously I had 50 ideas, and he probably only listened to probably 3, but it was at least something. And,
it's better than nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so you're in Montreal
Yep.
and you're looking to become a head brewer, and you think I want to go west. Why was Calgary on the list of cities that you were considering?
So I have two sisters, and one lives in Vancouver. The other one lives in Cochrane, so just outside of Calgary. So I had come and visited both of them a couple times, and it made like the move seem kind of very simple and kind of straightforward if I
Yeah.
wanted to do it. And I sort of chose Alberta more because it's like an affordable place to live, and I really like the mountains and like going hiking again because we did it a lot as kids. So in like the Adirondacks and stuff, and that sort of experience of being able to do that, but also like be able to like afford where I'm living and like
It's always
not feel
nice.
like I'm poor kind of thing, right? Because that was the problem with Vancouver was that like I could probably make more but have like a lower standard of living than I would have
Right.
had in Montreal. So that sounded awful to me. So
Yes. Um, so you mentioned so you're with Rapid Ascent Brewing.
yeah,
One of the things that stuck out to me was you mentioned when you talked to David from McCausland, you talked to him from between 15 to 20 minutes on the phone.
mm-hmm.
We're still fact checking that.
Yeah.
But that he emailed you immediately and
Yeah.
said, "Hey, listen, if you want a job, it's here for you." When we were talking before hitting the record button, it sounded something similar when you and Troy from Rapid Ascent talked, which is,
Yeah.
after a fairly brief conversation, he's like, "Yeah, if you want
Yeah,
to come here, there's a job here
I
waiting
guess,
for you."
I guess the difference is he said that before I hung up. So
Nice.
yeah, I guess I got better at interviews.
I was
So,
gonna
yeah.
say, like, what do you do? Like, what's the charm that you put on
Um,
these guys? That
Honestly, I basically just tell like the story of kind of like how I got into the industry, like telling them about like Brewtopia, then going over to Stack, then now like McCausland, and just sort of telling like my story, and then telling the experiences I had, and like that'll eat up like 12 minutes or something like that, and then all of a sudden, I think I like to think maybe like the passion comes through that like I really
Yeah.
care about this, and this is something I really want to do. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like you would have to ask them because
do you think it slightly might have something to do with that you have an economics degree?
yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's the main reason.
Yeah. Okay, so how long have you been in Calgary?
About a year now.
Okay.
It'll be a year in November.
Nice. What is, coming from so McCausland, how long have they been around for?
33 years.
33 years. And then, so there's obviously a lot of differences between Montreal and Calgary.
Yeah.
Culturally, and even just from a brewing perspective, I think a lot of their breweries are a lot older. So 33 years versus like 4 or 5 years for Rapid Ascent.
Yeah.
What was the biggest difference coming here?
I guess in terms of the city, like honestly haven't seen too much of Calgary because like I grew up like near Montreal. I grew up going downtown in Montreal and stuff. So the city life, I kind of got a lot of that. So kind of any free time I have, I end up going kind of like to the mountains. So
Yeah.
the fact that that's an hour drive is it's still kind of insane to me that like it's just so easy to head out there kind of.
Yeah. No, it's crazy. It's
So,
awesome.
yeah, and like I have a dog, so I bring my dog out there and stuff. So
Yeah.
So-
Did you have a dog? Did you move with a dog?
no, when I got here, I rescued a dog.
Well, that's nice of you.
Yeah.
Okay, so how would you describe Rapid Ascent? What are your guys' philosophies? Like, do you make a certain type of beer? Because one of the things that I find interesting is when someone like you moves across the country, do you already have philosophies in mind in terms of how you approach making beer? And then how do you blend that with, someone like Troy, who he's a fairly opinionated person. So how do you kind of take your philosophies and make them work in a new brewery?
Yeah. So the big thing is I wanted creative control over stuff because that was sort of like what I was missing at McCausland, right? They would just be like, here, make these beers kind of thing. So I wanted to be able to kind of like tweak and tinker with recipes and stuff, even existing ones. And Troy was very fine with that kind of thing because my big thing was like if we enter stuff into competitions and stuff and I get feedback that says like we don't like these sort of aspects of it, then like I'm like I can make adjustments to make the beer better, and then a lot of that's kind of like a snowballing effect, right? So it's like then if we do place and win like an award, then the sales team can take that and use that to try and bump up the beer and try and make it more appealing to customers and things like that.
Totally. So he's agreeable to that.
Yeah.
Sandy, another guy who works with that group. Is it fair to say he has a man crush on you?
I wouldn't phrase it that way. But
well, I can.
yeah.
But you don't have to. But no,
No.
I'm joking. I had lunch with him a couple times over the summer, and he was always like very excited that you were on board. So
Yeah, no, I think he's very happy that like since I have quite a bit of experience in the industry, like I think everyone's starting to realize like the small changes I'm making to beer is improving the beer. Plus, like I'm very used to having like deadlines and giving out like when a beer is going to be ready. So, for instance, if Sandy asked me like, okay, when's this like lager coming out? I can be like, okay, it'll be, like 3 weeks from today kind of thing, or
Yeah.
it'll be kegged, like on Wednesday, like let's say like the 28th or whatever. And then there's a good chance it will actually come out on like the 28th and stuff. So I think he's quite relieved that he can actually plan out kind of like sales
Right.
and things like that and actually like organize himself better.
Well, and that's so huge. Like I feel like when I look at the industry, the sales departments and the brewing departments nowadays, they work a lot more cohesively than they used to. And to
Right.
be a successful brewery, you guys have to be working together.
Yeah.
Right.
No, absolutely. And it's like, cause yeah, if the beer gets old, it'll start to get kind of like stale and like the flavors will change. So like the beer needs to sell and it needs to like move. And then at the same time, they need to know that like if you say like a beer is coming out in 2 weeks, that it's going to actually be out, because bars might be holding onto a tap just for that release kind of thing. So
Right.
a lot of that kind of communication and insurance really helps kind of drive how a brewery's run.
So in terms of beer and in terms of your philosophy, would you say that you have a philosophy like when you approach brewing?
So I would say like the starting kind of base is to make like a lot of solid, like very well made beers. So something like a hef, making a very like traditional one, or something like a hazy or like a West Coast to like really focus on like the traditional sort of ways they should be done. But then also, I'm trying to also, so right now we have a rotating tab. So I'm trying to come out with like newer and more interesting things so that we at least have something to kind of like test run. And then there I can be a little more creative. So right now we have a sour IPA. So it's a bit kind of like a hazy or New England. So it has
Okay.
a lot of those really fruity notes. So it's very like citrus and kind of like mixed berry flavor. And then because it's soured, it has much lower pH, which sort of really brightens out all those fruit flavors and things like that. So that's on tap right now. So that's a little more creative and a little different. But then it's good also to have like very like traditional styles as well, ones that like people will recognize.
Right. And how do you guys balance that? Like, so would you say that your traditional ones are kind of then become your cores?
Yeah, so that's basically what like the Incline series is. So
Okay.
like it sort of worked out kind of well that I came on at the same time they were kind of rebranding. So they were
Right.
coming out with like they had just ordered all the new Incline like cans and things like that. So kind of every single beer kind of got rebranded at the same time that I started, which helped a lot, because then like something like the Pale Ale is technically the Finnegan's Pale Ale. It's like replacing it, but it's the Incline Series Pale Ale. So I was able to make smaller like tweaks to that, and now it has like a new label and everything like that. So like I guess I'm hoping more people won't notice that it's slightly different.
Yeah, gotcha. So, and with that, because I feel like Rapid Ascent has a really interesting story,
Right.
because you have Rapid Ascent, but you also then have Rock Glacier Water,
Yeah.
and then Rock is making beers. How does that all fit together? Like, so from a consumer's perspective, maybe walk us through how all those things are connected.
So basically, Rapid Ascent has the sister company Rock,
Okay.
Glacier Water. So for a while, Rock was also had their own like alcohol license to make like Rock beers. We're kind of transferring away from that. I'm not 100% sure why. It might have to do with the fact like we had like 2 alcohol licenses and things like that. I think it might have just been a little too complicated.
Okay.
So basically, Rapid Ascent is going to just make all the beer, and then Rock is just going to be kind of like a beverage company.
Gotcha.
So Rock, we have the water, we have flavored waters, and obviously the water comes from a glacier from Fortress Mountain, and that has its own very unique kind of characteristics to it, and it's very like clean, and it's basically drinkable straight from like the glacier, which is pretty rare. And then in terms of Rapid Ascent side, we take that water and like our blonde is made with that, and like we have like a raspberry blonde ale that's made with that, and I just did a pilot test batch, so that should be on tap in the brewery in probably like 2 weeks or something like that. I made a stout using it because the glacier water has a very high like mineral count, which means it's quite like hard water, and that's something they feel like most likely has a huge effect on like Guinness, because Guinness is from Ireland, which has like very harsh water with high mineral count.
Right.
So a lot of people think that might be like the key to like what makes Guinness a very like unique flavor. So I'm curious. I completely had untreated glacier water and brewed a stout with it. So I'm curious kind of how that will turn out.
I don't think people really realize how much water plays a part in the making of beer, right? I remember years ago talking to the guys from Last Best, and so they had Last Best, Banff. I want to say it was Last Best, Banff, and then they used to have a brewery in Fort McMurray, but essentially they made the same beer in all 3 locations, but with the only difference being they used the water from each brewery, and they wanted to see what the difference in the flavor was, and that alone made such a big impact.
So most breweries, what they do is they take their water and then run it through like a softener, and you're essentially stripping as much stuff out of it as possible,
right,
to borderline almost have like distilled water at the end.
Right.
Then you can add your own minerals back in when you mash in. And the idea being you can make a very high mineral beer for something like a pale ale or a stout, or you can make a very low mineral beer for something like a Hefeweizen or like a lager.
Right.
So you can kind of build your own water chemistry to kind of have like the perfect water that you would have from like anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
Then in terms of having different kinds of water and stuff, it can really affect like how like the hops are kind of absorbed and how much flavor comes out of that. It can also greatly affect the yeast. So certain yeast strains get very stressed out by like a high mineral count. So then they start producing off flavors. So you can get like drastically different beer just from like the water chemistry.
High maintenance yeast.
Yeah.
Okay, so have you had a chance, since you've been in Calgary, have you had a chance to really get a sense of what the beer culture here is? I'm curious as to, comparing, Calgary or Alberta beer culture and the community to what it might be in like Montreal or Ontario or something like that.
I would say like the main thing is like you see different trends showing up in different places at different times. So I know right now in Ontario, the big thing is sours. Sours are going crazy. People just love their sour beer. In terms of Montreal, a big trend that's going right now is smoothie IPA, like smoothie beers. So
is that like a milkshake kind of thing? Or?
Not quite. It's essentially half fruit puree and half beer, and it makes this really thick like smoothie that just tastes like fruit because it essentially just is. Like I wouldn't really call it beer, but they're insanely popular. And I know a brewery a couple years ago, they were trying to mix it in their bright tank and then keg it. But the big problem is obviously the puree is so thick, it would like separate.
Yeah.
So then they would have to like shake up their kegs and stuff. And they kind of gave up on that, and they started having like one of those like slushy machines. So that would have like the puree in it. So then they would just pour half a puree and then half like a blonde beer. And then, you have like a raspberry smoothie essentially.
I feel like that's like a beer that eats like a meal.
Yeah, it's thick. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's thick, like as thick as a smoothie would be. Yeah.
So when you were young and you first started home brewing,
yeah.
What was it that kind of drew you to it?
Basically, a friend of mine was doing it, so I didn't know anything about making beer, right? So I went to my friend's house, and he was home brewing with his dad. So we were just like having dinner and stuff, and I didn't even realize what we were drinking was what they homebrewed because I didn't really realize that was something you could do.
Right.
So then I decided I really wanted to figure out how this was done. So I sort of said, like, if you guys need help, like, I'll come by and help. So they basically thought I would come once and never come again because there's so much cleaning, sterilization. The second
Right.
you put something down, it has to be cleaned again, kind of thing. And we're doing it in a garage, so there's dust everywhere. So it's like sterilization is even more important because the place is dirty. So they thought I would just like hate it, but then I was like, can I come back next week? Next week. Like,
Yeah.
I just want to keep doing it, kind of thing.
Well, it's so funny because you even said that when you're talking about Brewtopia, where it's like, yeah, I convinced them to let me clean the equipment in the kegs. I'm like, I don't want to break the news to you, but it would be pretty easy to convince someone to let you do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, I would clean kegs and clean the floor and stuff. Yeah.
Because I think that's part of brewing is you have to enjoy that because that's, I've talked to a lot of brewers and they'll say like my job is 90% janitor because if you don't start with a clean system, you're kind of fucked.
No, exactly. You really are just kind of a glorified janitor.
Yeah.
And it just sounds way cooler than saying that,
Yeah. So they had your friends had their own brewery. And so you were kind of like, oh, cool, I'll do this. So just thank God they didn't have like their own meth lab because, you probably would have been like, yeah, cool, I'll do that. So,
yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. Well, it's always good to have a backup plan.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so what I guess are you most excited about now? Because let's say it's been 10 years since that, or it's been longer than that?
In terms of homebrewing, I started like 12 years ago.
Okay,
right?
so what keeps you excited? Because it's one thing to become excited. Homebrewing, it's a new thing, but 12 years later, what kind of keeps you excited?
Honestly, like there's so many like newer styles coming out and people are always kind of experimenting and trying to come up with something new. So for instance, like when I started homebrewing, like the sort of New England style, the hazy, they didn't exist, right? So I sort of saw that evolution and saw them come out. Then there was this big trying to figure out how that one brewery did it and trying to copy it and try to mass create it and reproduce it and stuff. And then it became about how every brewery would like talk to each other and be like, I tried this, I did that, and what worked out really better. And then like a hazy or a New England style is like even better now than it was like 5 years ago because a lot of brewers kind of figured out kind of how to make it and kind of optimize pulling the flavors out of the hops and things like that.
Right.
So to me, like even like in another 5-10 years, like I think a new style will come out and like you'll really watch people kind of try and figure out and optimize how to best make that as well.
Yeah. Okay, so with Rapid Ascent, so you brought in the Incline series.
Yeah.
Sexy looking cans, great beer. What's the vision for you guys? Like, because it in a short amount of time, I feel like Rapid Ascent has done a lot. 5 years from now, what do you see?
Well, hopefully, like I know we've bounced around a couple ideas and stuff. Like it would, like we're a little like out of the way in Calgary and stuff. So it'd be nice to have like a second location, maybe more downtown. But we've also bounced around with the idea of just expanding and getting into more kind of bars, getting into more liquor stores and stuff. And the big thing now, like with the fact I've kind of reworked some recipes, the fact that we have a full kind of new line of beer, the big thing is trying to get that out so for people to try so that we can find out and get like feedback back, but also see kind of if like it will actually sell and like then try and hopefully that will kind of like snowball and then equal more sales and then more liquor stores will be interested.
Right.
And what I find really interesting about Rapid Ascent is since it also works with like the rock water. For instance, rock water is starting to get into a lot of like hotels and stuff, or especially around BAP at Jasper, because it kind of meets the whole kind of mold of how the hotels are kind of selling the whole, this is the Rocky Mountains and things like that. So then to be able to be like, this is like a glacier water from the Rocky Mountains, it kind of meets their whole theme.
Yeah.
So then kind of coordinating with that, we're hoping to also push, the beer into like their bars and things like that. So it's nice to see how everything kind of works together.
Yeah.
And like the beverage company can actually help promote the brewery, and the brewery can help promote the beverage company as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing I've always liked about Troy, because I've known Troy for a long time, and he's very open to, trying ideas, right? Like he's not fixed on something. If he wants to, try something out, he's not afraid to do that. So, as a young brewer, it must be kind of exciting to be part of a team that's like, I feel like if you threw an idea out there, you have a team that would be pretty open to giving it a shot.
Yeah, no, I think they really would be. So it's exciting. So for now, like honestly, I know I've been here for almost a year, but it feels like I moved here like 3 months ago, because we're still trying to get settled and sort of
Totally.
like I spent the first months trying to find somewhere to live and things like that. So now that I'm feeling more settled and stuff and more comfortable, I'm starting to write more like one-off recipes and stuff for the tap room. But I'm hoping maybe some of them, if they turn out really well, they could become, like full lineups in like the Incline series. But yeah, we'll have to see kind of thing. Yeah,
absolutely.
Still early days for things like that.
Okay, so random, well, not random to you, but random question to someone listening. I was asking you about accomplishments that you've had that stand out. And so you were involved in the creation of Puppers, Puppers beer, which was part of Leonard Kenny. So talk about that.
Okay, so basically, Letterkenny was a TV show that's Canadian that was filmed in Sudbury. So I think it's actually quite popular here in Alberta.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
And basically, because it was filmed in Sudbury and they wanted to try and release a beer to sort of go along with the show, it's what they drink in the show is called Puppers, but obviously the beer didn't exist, so they wanted to make it exist. So we talked with the production company, which was New Metric, about the fact that we could actually make the beer, get it in the LCBO, and release it across Ontario. So they really liked that as like a limited like series kind of release for the summer. So I was involved in the sense that I had to budget what the beer would cost, because we also had to give a percentage to New Metric Media. So if they got too much, then like we could actually like lose money on the beer, right? So figuring out that was really important.
That's where your economics degree
yeah,
comes
exactly.
in, right?
Yeah. So yeah, a lot of time on Excel, which I guess that made the 4 years worth it, right?
It's all
Then it was also negotiating how much they would get. I then had to talk to the LCBO, get the beer registered, licensed, and then released through the LCBO. We then had to make all the beer, and I was also a brewer at the time, so I made basically half of every single batch of beer of Puppers for, I don't know, 2.5 years or something like that.
Nice.
So yeah, that was really exciting. It would sell out instantly, which was really cool to see, like how beers would, like that much popularity and that much excitement around a beer was really cool to see. And you also sort of realize the more annoying side of LCBO, because they don't fully understand smaller breweries. So we would send a place like 4 cases of Puppers, and we'd go, okay, limit how much someone can buy, because we cannot send you beer for like 2 weeks. And they go, okay. And then let's say like release date, I don't know, like 10 a.m. or something. They're like, yeah, someone walked in and bought all 4 cases. And we're like, okay. And they're like, yeah, but now like there's 20 people in the store who want to buy it. We're like, well, we can't do anything about that, because we told you we can't get you beer for 2 weeks.
Right.
So that's why we told you to limit the release. So they're like, yeah, but like someone bought 4 cases, like that's a good thing kind of thing. And we're like, no, that's why we told you to limit how much people could buy.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a whole interesting experience as well.
And so, and that beer is still being made?
I believe so. I don't think Stack makes it anymore.
Okay.
I think they've moved on to like our larger brewery and
Gotcha.
stuff. But
cool.
Yeah.
Well, this is awesome, man. It's great to get to know you. Is this something? This is a loaded question because the answer has to be yes. But
right.
Is this something that you enjoy doing? Like Sandy mentioned that in terms of being a brewer, you do like getting out of the back and kind of interfacing with the public and sharing your story.
Yeah.
Is he correct in saying that?
Oh yeah, yeah. Like I'll talk to anyone about beer because
Yeah.
it's like who wouldn't, right?
Yeah.
So, and I feel like as a brewer, you kind of have to because that's all anyone wants to talk to you about is beer
Right.
and sort of like your story and stuff. So you kind of have to enjoy talking
Well,
about it.
Yeah, and I agree. But you know, I always compare it to a restaurant. I don't know if it's a perfect, you know, comparison, but you know, there's front of house and back of house, right? And
Right.
some people are back of house because they just enjoy the process, but they don't want to be talking to people because it's just like if I wanted to talk to people, I'd be front of house. Like I just want to do my
Right.
shit and go home. But yeah, no, Sandy was very much like that's I think part of why because knowing Sandy, he's very outgoing. He's very
he
kind
is.
of. And so I think that's what he likes about you is like not only do you make really good beer, but you're not afraid to join him on a few sales calls and stuff like that
Yeah.
and share the story. Which,
No, absolutely. No,
yeah.
I do enjoy those because yeah, it's like a fun little road trip. You get to go outside.
Awesome, man. Okay, well, thanks for sharing your story. The beer's amazing, and yeah, really cool. Thanks for coming in, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Okay, take care, Will.
Bye.